Hey guys, tonight we're curling up inside a dimly lit medieval cottage, where straw pokes through your linen shift. A pot of something unspeakable steams faintly beneath the bed, and the only lullaby is a cow snuffling in the next room. Cozy, right? You're about to sleep like it's 1347, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this mattress. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squat down and eye the lumpy bedding. No plush memory foam here, just a coarse sack stuffed with straw, reeds, or if you're fancy, heather. This isn't a bed so much as a mildly organized pile of scratchy discomfort. You plop onto it, and the smell hits you. Hay, sweat, and something musky that might be coming from the chamber pot tucked under the bed frame. And yes, that's standard medieval practice. Waste buckets under beds were just there. No bathroom. Breaks in the night unless you felt like running barefoot through mud and ghosts. That faint stench. That's part of your nightly routine. The medieval bedroom isn't really a room either. If you're poor, which, let's be real, you are. You're sharing this one-room hut with your entire family. Parents, kids, possibly a grandparent, and maybe a hen or two, all snoozing inches apart. The idea of personal space hasn't even been invented yet. You roll over and elbow your sister in the ribs. She grunts. You grunt back. That's the extent of your pillow talk. A common sleeping platform might just be a wooden board raised off the damp ground, if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's just straw tossed straight onto a dirt floor. Bugs are a given. Fleas are roommates. And lice? Let's not even start. Still, for many, this was the good life. Beds, even straw ones, were expensive. If you didn't have one, you might curl up next to the fireplace, which sounded romantic, until a stray ember landed on your leg mid-dream. Or maybe you slept in the stable with the animals, which, weirdly enough, was often warmer. Meanwhile, if you were rich, and I mean really rich, you ascended to a whole new plane of sleep luxury, the canopy bed. These were essentially 4-poster thrones, decked out in velvet, linen, and carved oak. The heavy curtains weren't just for style. They kept out drafts and offered precious privacy. Fun fact, nobles often conducted business, received guests, or even ate meals in bed. Historians still argue whether the bedchamber was more of a status lounge than a sleeping space, but even with all that wealth, hygiene didn't exactly scale up. Mattresses were still straw-based, and bedbugs did not discriminate, and servants often slept on the floor, sometimes right beneath their employer's bed, ready to jump up at a moment's notice. Imagine snoozing under your boss's mattress. Not stressful at all. Let's not forget that the mattress itself had to be beaten regularly. No, not emotionally. You had to literally beat the straw around to redistribute it. You'd grab a stick or your hand and start whacking the sack until it was mildly less lumpy. Think of it as the medieval version of fluffing your pillow, but with more splinters and probably fewer teeth. Speaking of pillows, if you had one, it was filled with anything from goose down, rare and expensive, to moss, rags, or even sawdust. Some poorer folks just bunched up their outer tunics or used a rolled-up cloak. You can practically hear your chiropractor screaming from years in the future. Temperature was another adventure. Without central heating, winters meant piling on. Every available layer. Wool blankets, furs, and bodies. In summer, the air turned muggy and smothering, made worse by all those people exhaling next to you. Windows, if you had them, were small slits covered with oiled parchment or thin fabric. Glass was rare and reserved for churches or royalty. And yes, some people did sleep naked, but only under certain conditions. Clothes were precious, and laundering them was a major ordeal, so most folks slept in the same outfit they wore all day. If you were particularly fancy, you might own a nightshirt, a long tunic reserved solely for sleeping. If not, You just kept your dusty wool on and hoped for the best. Meanwhile, hygiene was performative at best. Beds were rarely cleaned. Linens were washed infrequently, if ever. And that chamber pot? Emptied in the morning by whoever drew the short straw. Pun intended. Still, there were perks. Unlike today's overstimulated brains drowning in blue light and endless scrolling, the medieval peasant had one job once the sun went down: sleep. No late-night doom scrolling, no TikToks, no emails. Just darkness, fatigue, and the occasional mouse running across your chest. That kind of simplicity? Almost enviable, almost. It's worth noting that some medieval folks had surprisingly complex relationships with their sleep setups. Certain communities developed rituals around bedding down for the night, including prayers, charms, or recitations, meant to ward off evil spirits. Because obviously, if you died in your sleep, it was probably a demon's fault. But more on that later. Tonight, your mattress crunches faintly beneath you. You shift to avoid a particularly aggressive reed poking your thigh. Outside, the wind howls against the wooden shutters. Inside, someone is softly snoring. Probably the chicken. You close your eyes. Sleep won't be luxurious. It might not even be restful. But it's the medieval way. And strangely, that's comforting. You wake up in the dark, not because of a noise or a nightmare or the goat chewing on your sleeve again, but because your body is just done sleeping for now. Which makes total sense, because in the medieval world, people didn't sleep in one uninterrupted block. They had two sleeps, first sleep and second sleep. Sounds like something a toddler invented, right? But no, this was totally normal. After the sun went down and you crawled into your hay pile, you'd naturally fall into your first sleep, usually a few hours long. Around midnight, give or take, you'd wake up. And you weren't alone. Everyone did it. This gap between first and second sleep, often called the watch or the waking, lasted anywhere from 30 minutes to a few hours. It wasn't insomnia. It wasn't some weird sleep disorder. It was just built into life. People expected it. They planned for it. So here you are, in the dark, staring at the ceiling beams. Your back's sore, someone's mumbling in their sleep, the dog is twitching, and you've got nothing to do until your next round of unconsciousness. You might as well get up. And that's exactly what medieval folks did. Some used the time for prayer. The deeply religious would take this quiet midnight window to connect with God, whispering psalms or reciting hours-long verses by heart. Others, well, they used the time for things a little less divine. Couples might take this opportunity for intimacy, especially since the kids were mostly asleep. Monks often documented this period as useful for both reflection and temptation, an awkward balance of piety and desire. If you were a scholar or scribe, this break was golden. You'd light a candle or an oil lamp and read or write. The house was quiet. The animals were calm. Your annoying cousin wasn't asking about turnips. It was the ideal setting to scribble down something profound. Or just doodle a goat wearing a bishop's hat in the margins. Monastic boredom was real. What's wild is that this two-sleep pattern wasn't exclusive to Europe. There's evidence from other cultures, parts of Africa, the Middle East, even early America, where people naturally divided their night into phases. Historians still argue whether this pattern was biologically driven or simply a product of pre-industrial lifestyles. Was our brain wired for two-part sleep, or did candlelight just not cut it for long nighttime productivity? Either way, artificial light eventually changed everything. Once gas lamps, and later electricity, entered the picture, people started pushing bedtime later and sleeping straight through. The idea of waking up at AM to stare at the ceiling, or milk a cow or write poetry, sounded ridiculous. By the late 1800s, segmented sleep faded from mainstream culture. Now, waking in the middle of the night feels like failure. Back then, it was just what you did. Some historians believe the waking period was actually one of the most creative times of the day. People weren't yet fully alert, but not fully groggy either. Kind of that floaty, dreamy brain mode you hit while lying in bed trying to remember if you left the stove on. Ideas could bloom, secrets were whispered, dreams were shared and interpreted while still fresh and weird. A fringe belief at the time suggested that this liminal hour, the space between sleep cycles, was a spiritual gateway, a crack between worlds where angels might visit or demons might crawl through the walls. No pressure. You might be wondering, what exactly kicked off this first sleep? Basically, the sun. Medieval life followed the sun's cycle with an almost reverent precision. No 9-to-5 office grind, no social media scrollathon until AM. Once the light dimmed, people began to wind down. First sleep generally started a couple of hours after sunset, around or PM, depending on the season. And it wasn't always a soft descent into slumber. Candlelight was expensive, and only the rich could afford to burn them casually. For everyone else, darkness fell quickly. You'd go from daylight to pitch black in about 20 minutes, and your body took the hint. Bedtime wasn't a decision, it was an inevitability. So now you're in the in-between. You rub your eyes, maybe you shuffle across the floorboards for a quick prayer or to poke the embers in the hearth. Maybe you just lie there and whisper into the dark, asking your sibling if they're awake. They probably are. The two of you murmur about the day's work, or tomorrow's chores, or that weird dream you had where the pig was speaking French. This quiet, intimate half-sleep state is one of the few times people really get to talk. No one's shouting, no one's working, just calm voices and the occasional snore from the corner. Eventually, the yawns return. Your body starts tugging you toward unconsciousness again. You snuggle deeper into the itchy straw, pull the rough wool blanket higher, and drift into second, sleep. Which, for the record, usually lasted until dawn. Give or take a rooster. Historians are still debating what caused the shift to modern single sleep routines. Was it purely industrialization? Or did our brains adapt to new environmental cues like artificial light and mechanical schedules? Some researchers argue that modern insomnia is actually a lingering instinct. Our minds still half expecting to wake up midnight and go stoke a fire or whisper to a goat. Speaking of goats, yours has climbed into bed with you. Again, you don't even fight it anymore. You just scoot over, close your eyes, and let second sleep carry you off. Tomorrow will be exhausting, muddy, and full of turnips. But for now, you're right where you're supposed to be. You wake up to something warm and damp breathing against your neck. No, it's not your partner. It's the goat. Again. You don't scream because this is just life now. You're sharing your bed with livestock, and somehow this is the least weird part of your sleeping situation. Welcome to the charming world of medieval co-sleeping, with creatures of all shapes, smells, and species. See, if you live in a small, peasant household, your options are limited. One room, maybe two if you're lucky, and absolutely zero concept of bedrooms like we know them today. The sleeping space is shared, and that includes your animals. Sheep, goats, chickens, and occasionally pigs all camp out with you, especially in colder months. Why? Simple, they're warm. Medieval cottages were basically big wooden boxes with a fire pit in the middle. Heat leaked out faster than you could say frostbite. So it made perfect sense to bring the livestock inside. Think of it as a very loud, very stinky version of heated blankets. You pull the thin blanket tighter and try to scoot away from the goat's hooves without causing a bleating tantrum. Beside you, your cousin is wrapped in a rough tunic, snoring gently. At the foot of the shared straw mattress, 3 chickens are roosting, oblivious to the boundary between bed and barn. It's not all cuddly. Animals get up, they wander, they do things. A chicken might lay an egg in your bed. A goat might have an incident, but the benefits outweigh the discomfort. In addition to warmth, your livestock are also protected. Leaving them outside overnight means risking theft or attacks from wolves, foxes, or worse. Your neighbor Jeff, who's definitely eyeing your best sheep. This arrangement wasn't just for peasants. Even some wealthier households stabled prized animals indoors during harsh winters, though they might get their own corner instead of full snuggle rights. Historians still argue whether this closeness to animals improved overall health or made people more susceptible to disease. On one hand, regular exposure may have strengthened immune systems, like the medieval version of germ training. On the other, let's not pretend sleeping next to a coughing cow is peak hygiene. There's compelling evidence linking zoonotic diseases to this cozy arrangement. But hey, no one knew what bacteria was. You just called it bad air and moved on. It's not like you had the option of calling animal control. In fact, in many towns, keeping livestock indoors was legally protected. Your cow was practically a member of the family. A smelly, loud, possibly flea-infested family member, but family nonetheless. You groggily sit up and blink around the shadowy room. Morning's still a ways off, but your brain is alert again thanks to a rogue chicken that's decided your blanket makes a great nest. In the corner, someone's lighting a bit of kindling for the morning fire. The cow shifts, lowing softly, and the goat, you guessed it, is still breathing on your neck. Sleeping with animals was such a normalized practice that medieval artwork occasionally depicted holy families like Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus cozily surrounded by livestock. If it's good enough for the Saviour, it's good enough for your average ploughman. But practicality wasn't the only reason for this odd companionship. There was a symbolic layer too. Animals were often seen as part of the household soul. Their health reflected your own fortune. A happy pig meant good times ahead. A grumpy goat might mean a bad harvest. So it made sense to keep them close, physically and metaphorically. And let's not forget, animals were surprisingly involved in household drama. There are records of pigs being put on trial for crimes. Yes, actual court trials. One pig was famously tried and executed for killing a child. That's right, executed, complete with legal representation and witnesses. So when your livestock acts out, you're not just annoyed, you're worried about legal consequences. The stakes are weirdly high. Still, when you're freezing, you welcome their body heat. You reach out and rest a hand on the sheep's woolly side. It's rhythmic, calm. She blinks at you with complete disinterest. Comforting. Weirdly, this animal cohabitation isn't completely a relic of the past. Even today, plenty of rural homes across the world still bring livestock indoors, especially in mountainous or cold regions. The technology might have evolved, but the logic remains the same. Heat, safety, companionship. Medieval people didn't have the luxury of locking animals away in distant barns or shining stainless steel pens. Your home was your world, and everyone in it, human or otherwise, shared every moment, including bedtime. Of course, there were downsides. Noise was constant. Mooing, bleating, clucking, oinking. Privacy was non-existent. You tried having a serious conversation with your spouse while a goat loudly urinates 2 feet away. It really sets the tone. Also, fleas. Have we mentioned the fleas? Entire infestations could bloom overnight. Bedding wasn't washable in any modern sense, so you'd hang it out to dry, beat it with sticks, and hope the critters didn't come back. They always did. You might think people eventually got used to all this, but medieval writings suggest that even they knew it was unpleasant. Complaints about itchy bedding, smelly goats, and the constant rustling of feathers in the dark show up in letters and poems. But as with many things in the medieval world, you endured it, laughed when you could, and went to bed anyway. You lie back down. The fire's crackling faintly now, throwing long shadows on the walls. The air is damp, but warmer thanks to your living space heaters. The goat gives a small, satisfied grunt, and finally, mercifully, stops breathing on your neck. You close your eyes. You don't love this, but it works. You wake to the unmistakable sound of someone loudly grinding grain. It's still pitch dark outside, but time waits for no medieval peasant. Morning isn't marked by sunlight. It's announced by motion, noise, and the frantic rhythm of daily survival. You stretch, stiff from sleep, as someone nearby grumbles about the hand mill not working properly. The smell of damp straw, Old wool and barnyard funk hasn't improved overnight, but at least you're not shivering anymore. Thanks, goat. You rise from your shared sleeping spot, brushing off bits of hay that stuck to your tunic. You don't have pajamas, just the same clothes you wore yesterday and will wear again tomorrow. Changing garments is a weekly, maybe monthly event. Washing them? Even rarer. Welcome to the medieval morning ritual. You shuffle past your aunt, who's already stoking the hearth. It's not glamorous, just a low stone ring filled with yesterday's ashes. She adds twigs and a few pats of dried cow dung for fuel. Firewood is scarce, and dung is surprisingly efficient. The fire catches, releasing a familiar earthy scent that mixes with the sour whiff of fermented cabbage from last night's supper. Breakfast isn't coming soon. First, you work. The rhythm of the medieval morning is slow but unrelenting. There's no coffee to jolt you awake, no shower to rinse off the night. You splash your face with cold water from a bucket, unless it's frozen, in which case, tough luck. There's no soap unless someone's been boiling down ashes and animal fat recently. Hygiene is a hopeful suggestion. You grab a hunk of yesterday's bread and gnaw at the hard edges while heading outside to relieve yourself. There's no toilet, just a communal pit latrine if your village is fancy, or the back, corner of the yard if it's not. You try to avoid eye contact with the pigs. They're watching. Always watching. By now, the village is waking. Smoke curls lazily from crooked chimneys. Roosters strut and scream like tiny feathered tyrants. Children emerge rubbing their eyes, immediately set to chores. There's no getting ready in the modern sense. No brushing teeth, no morning playlist, no quick yoga flow. You just start doing things. Your first task, fetch water. The well is at the edge of town. You and several others trudge there with wooden buckets and sleepy glares. The path is muddy, always muddy, and your shoes, if you have any, are already soaked. They're not left or right shoes, by the way. Medieval footwear didn't believe in asymmetry. Just two vaguely foot-shaped leather flaps tied with string. Comfy. At the well, you wait your turn while trying to avoid splashing yourself with the frigid water. This water is precious. It'll be used for cooking, drinking, cleaning, and maybe, a partial wash later if someone smells particularly offensive. You haul your heavy, sloshing bucket back home like a champion of mundane athleticism. Now, and only now, does breakfast begin. You sit cross-legged near the hearth as your aunt pours yesterday's leftover pottage into a pot to warm. Pottage is the Swiss Army knife of medieval cuisine. It's a thick, soupy stew of grains, roots, vegetables, and whatever meat scraps or non-meat mystery bits are available. Today's batch is turnip heavy with some wilted greens and a bone that might once have belonged to a chicken or something chicken adjacent. You eat in silence. There's no breakfast table, no chairs, just laps and bowls. The wooden spoon has a crack in it, but it works fine. Everyone shares from the same pot. Hygiene tip of the day: don't ask how many mouths have licked this spoon. You'll only make it worse. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were perpetually underfed or just modest eaters. Food was inconsistent. In the good years, you ate plenty of grain and root vegetables, and maybe even a sausage or two. In the bad years, you learned to make soup from nettles and pray for early harvests. Quirky side note: some folks believed that eating fruit in the morning was dangerous. Moist foods like apples were thought to throw your body out of balance unless consumed in the right season and phase of digestion. So if you were craving an apple with your breakfast porridge, forget it. That's practically asking to die from imbalance-induced dysentery. You finish eating, your belly not exactly full, but no longer hollow. The goat bleats impatiently, reminding you that she needs milking, again. She's dramatic like that. There's no time to lounge. Work begins at sunrise, and you're already behind. Fields need tilling, bread needs baking, and that one fence that fell over in last night's windstorm isn't going to fix itself. A medieval morning is a marathon of repetitive, back-breaking chores that blend into one another until you look up and realize it's already noon. You might think this life sounds grim, but here's the odd thing. Mornings were often a source of quiet joy. Birds chirped, air was cool, people worked together, jokes were whispered. Even with aching limbs and empty stomachs, there was rhythm, camaraderie, and a kind of comfort in knowing exactly what the day required of you. Your chores take you outside again, where the village is now buzzing with life. Someone's beating laundry on a rock near the stream. A boy chases an escaped duck through the mud, slipping, laughing, covered in filth but not caring. A cart squeaks by with a single weary ox trudging forward. Historians often note the strange peace of these early hours, before the drama, the church bells, the sudden weather shifts, or the angry shouting about debts and sheep thefts. Morning was a time when the world was, for a brief moment, predictable. You feel it too, standing with your hands full of damp wood and your toes half frozen in your mismatched shoes. The day will bring trouble, almost certainly. But for now, you're alive, your belly is half full, the goat is not actively attacking anyone, and the sun is starting to rise behind the foggy hills. You exhale, long and slow, into the cold morning air. The day has officially begun. It's just past midday, now, and you're starving again. Not hangry, not I skipped brunch, the kind of gnawing hunger that lives in your spine and makes you briefly consider chewing on a stick. You glance down at the dry crust in your hand, yesterday's bread, baked hard enough to be legally considered a weapon, and sigh. This is lunch. Sort of. Lunch in the medieval world wasn't a grand event. It was more like a pause, a functional blip in the workday. In most villages, it happened sometime around noon or early afternoon, depending on how the sun looked and how loudly your stomach growled. Meals were rarely named, just described as the bit we eat before the other bit we eat. Today, you sit on a stone outside the cottage, gnawing on your bread, while watching someone chase a cow with a bucket. Your bread has been soaked in a bit of ale to soften it, because your teeth, like everyone's, aren't exactly flawless. You don't want to crack a molar on barley crust. Remember that delicious idea of a long lunch break with choices, condiments, and maybe some dessert? Nope. The midday meal is likely just more pottage, or if you're lucky, a chunk of onion, a slice of cheese, or maybe a dried herring if someone was feeling fancy. The bread you're eating isn't fluffy, it's dense, heavy, made from rye or barley, sometimes adulterated with things like bean flour, acorns, or, if your local miller is a scam artist, ground up chalk. Historians still argue whether people had distinct meals with clear names like we do today, or whether eating was more of a grazing habit, just shoving food into your face whenever your hands were free. Either way, lunch isn't romantic. It's whatever you can carry, whatever's left from breakfast, and whatever your goat hasn't stepped on. And drinks? Water's risky, especially in town. Rivers are basically medieval trash highways filled with everything you don't want near your mouth, so you drink ale. Weak ale, sometimes called small beer, with just enough alcohol to kill bacteria but not enough to get you tipsy, unless you're 5 years old, in which case enjoy your first buzz. Even kids drank ale. It was just safer. You take another bite and glance up at the sun. It's slipping past its peak, casting long shadows over your neighbour's roof. Thatched, of course, the stuff of romantic storybooks, unless you've had to sleep beneath one during a rainstorm. Then it's less storybook charm and more, why is my bed constantly moist? After lunch, people rest. Not because they're lazy, because they have to. The body, after hours of hard manual labour, just says no. So for a brief window, things slow down. You find a place to sit, to lean, to let your legs dangle over a barrel or a log. Maybe you chat. Maybe you stare into the middle distance, too tired to blink. Maybe, if you're bold, you sneak in a nap. And, oh, the naps. We think of midday naps as indulgent, lazy. But in medieval life, they were often necessary. You woke before dawn. You'll work until nightfall. If you don't steal a few minutes now, your body will collapse in the field while holding a shovel, which is not a cute look. You close your eyes and let yourself drift. For just a moment. Just the length of a rooster's squawk. But sleep during daylight isn't always peaceful. There are chores yelling at you from inside your brain. The grain sacks need mending. The roof needs patching. The chickens are plotting something again. And someone's calling your name, either for help or because the bucket broke. Again, you open your eyes. Break's over. It's time to get back to work. Afternoon is when things get more unpredictable. Maybe you're heading to the fields to help with harvest, or maybe you're weaving, spinning, repairing, cobbling, brewing, tanning, salting, or thatching. You're doing whatever the season demands. Medieval life doesn't care about personal preference. The tasks rotate with the calendar, and survival is the project plan. Occasionally, you'll hear the church bell ring. It doesn't mark the hour, clocks aren't really a thing yet, but it does give some sense of time passing. Bells tell you when to pray, when to work, when to stop, when to grieve. They're the iPhone notifications of the medieval world. Loud, vaguely ominous, and impossible to ignore. You duck into the kitchen to grab a new hunk of bread, and there's your cousin again, slapping dough into shape like it owes her money. She's making more trencher bread, thick, unsalted slabs that double as edible plates. They'll be used during supper, soaked with stew, and later either eaten or tossed to the dogs, or more often to beggars outside the church. You might call that kindness. She calls it waste management. Quirky fact time. Bread was so central to life that bakers in some cities were subject to official inspections. If you shortchanged a loaf or tried to sneak in wood chips or clay, you could be fined, publicly shamed, or even put in the stocks. No one messed with bread. By now, the shadows are lengthening. Afternoon is bleeding into evening. But that doesn't mean rest is near. You still have animals to pen, tools to clean, and dinner to prep. You glance around at your neighbours. Everyone is moving, doing, mending, lifting. Not because they love hard work, because if they don't eat. You brush flour off your tunic and head back outside. A group of kids are skipping stones near the stream. A dog chases a stick with more enthusiasm than you've felt in weeks. Somewhere nearby, someone is playing a reed pipe, badly. But it's the only music you'll hear today, and you smile in spite of yourself. Lunch is a memory now, a smear of cheese, a grainy crust, a vague ache that never quite leaves your belly. But you carry on. You always do. Because the day isn't done, not even close. The sun dips low, dragging the colour out of the sky like it's turning the volume down on the whole world. Shadows stretch long and spindly across the fields. You feel the shift, the cooling air, the murmurs of winding down, the faint scent of supper cooking over scattered hearths. But before you can rest, there's the evening scramble. You're not unfamiliar with it. It's a daily routine, as fixed as the stars. Tie up the animals, secure the tools, slap the door to make sure it hasn't warped again, and make peace with whatever didn't get done, because it's not getting done today. First, the animals. The goat has gone missing again, because of course she has. She's not just a goat, she's a tiny agent of chaos. After some shouting, stumbling, and light bribery with turnip peels, you corral her back into her shelter. She eyes you with smug disinterest. Next, the chickens. These tiny feathered tyrants need to be coaxed, one by one, into their coop. They're surprisingly defiant, especially after a long day of pecking, scratching, and attempting escape. You lose one for a moment, only to discover it on the thatched roof, looking down at you like it's won something. You mutter a curse under your breath. Not that it helps. Once the livestock is squared away, the tools need to be brought inside, or at least under cover. Iron is expensive, and rust never sleeps. You lean the shovel against the wall, hang the hoe on a nail, and double-check the grain sacks for holes. Or, worse, mice. You spot one mouse. It's bold. It stares you down like it pays rent. You pretend not to see it. It's been a long day. Finally, as the last of the light fades, it's time for supper. Supper is the biggest meal of the day. Mostly because you've earned it. You've earned every steaming ladle of barley stew, every chewy crust, every tiny scrap of salty meat. If it's a feast day or a good harvest season, you might even see something exotic on the table, like leeks or a slice of bacon. Wild stuff. You gather with your family or your neighbours, depending on space and mood. There's no dining table, unless you're in the manor house, and no individual servings. You eat communally, from a central pot, using trenchers or just your fingers. Everyone knows not to double dip, though it still happens. You pretend not to notice. Your bowl is filled with something that smells surprisingly nice. Onions, herbs, maybe even a pinch of saffron if someone's cousin smuggled it in from a nearby port. You tear a piece of bread from the round loaf, scoop up some stew, and eat, and talk. Evening is when people decompress, casually, simply, usually while still doing chores. Someone mends a net. Someone braids rushes for flooring. Someone sharpens knives. But the voices rise in relaxed cadence. Gossip, complaints, prayers, small jokes. Quirky fact for tonight's supper. In some regions, people believed it was bad luck to eat eggs after sunset, something about the moon affecting their purity. So if there are eggs on the table, they're being eaten quickly, and with side-eye glances at the window. You settle back after eating, belly warm, hands slightly sticky, and eyelids heavier than you'd admit. But you're not done yet. There's a moment after supper, a sort of social twilight, when stories are told. Someone lights a rushlight, or if you're wealthier, a tallow candle. The room glows dimly. A neighbour leans in and begins spinning a tale about a knight who was cursed by a fairy, or a baker who made bread so light it floated into the sky. Everyone listens, not because they believe it, though some do, but because it's comforting, predictable, like dessert, but for the brain. These oral traditions are your Netflix, your bedtime podcast, your group chat. Historians still argue whether storytelling served primarily as moral instruction or just entertainment. But you know that on nights like this, with the wind howling outside and the walls groaning slightly in the cold, a good tale is a kind of protection. Someone laughs, someone gasps, someone snores quietly in the corner, and just like that, the day's energy slips further away, but not before a final round of night chores. Yes, more chores. You didn't think this was over, did you? Water for the fire bucket. Always keep one nearby in case a spark gets cheeky. Bedding pulled out and shaken to dislodge bugs. Windows, if you have them, barred. Doors barred. You're not locking out people so much as animals. And worse, spirits. Here's your fringe tidbit for the evening. In some places, it was believed that evil spirits prowled after dusk, slipping through cracks in the walls or descending chimneys. People stuffed their keyholes with straw or hung protective herbs. Over the door, rosemary, yarrow, or St. John's wort. You might scoff, but after hearing enough weird sounds outside in the dark, even the most skeptical villager considers hanging a charm or two. You step outside one last time. The village is quieter now. The last fires flicker. Dogs curl beside doors. A few stars blink to life overhead, stretching in the black sky like tiny reminders that yes, the world keeps spinning. You breathe in the sharp night air. It smells like smoke, earth, and, faintly, someone's spoiled cabbage. You try not to breathe in too deeply. You shuffle back inside, the rushlight casting your shadow tall and strange against the wall. You wrap your cloak tighter, tug the straw mattress into shape, and lay down beside your siblings, your cousins, the goat. Not too close to the goat. She snores and kicks, and as you settle, you realize this day, like every day, was long. It was bone-tiring, muddy, hungry, often unfair. But it had rhythm, and in that rhythm, chores, stories, shared meals, you find something like peace. You close your eyes, listening to the soft sounds of others doing the same. Night has truly begun. You're still lying there, on that crackling straw-stuffed mattress, limbs finally going slack. when the darkness outside shifts ever so slightly. It's not morning. Not yet. This is the strange little slice of time in the middle of the night when your body, like everyone else's in your century, decides, hey, let's wake up for a bit. And you do. Welcome to the first sleep. See, in the medieval world, people didn't sleep in one uninterrupted chunk like we do today. That's solid. 7 to 9 hours you chase with weighted blankets and sleep apps. That's a modern thing. Back then, most people slept in 2 separate phases. They called them the first sleep and the second sleep. So here you are, waking up naturally sometime between midnight and AM. You stretch a little, roll, over and blink at the thatched ceiling. A faint snore echoes nearby, probably the goat again. Someone's cousin mumbles in their sleep. The room's cold. Your feet are cold. Everything is a little bit damp. But this in-between period isn't weird to you. It's normal. In fact, it's expected. Some folks use it to pray, called watch prayers. Others sneak in a little conversation, a short walk to check on animals, even a nibble of whatever's left over from supper. Couples often use this time for, well, let's just say marital bonding, and leave it PG, as promised. One fringe practice that historians delight in bringing up. Some believe this interlude was a prime time for dream interpretation. You might quietly recount what your brain just served you. Was it a warning? A prophecy? Or just your subconscious? Trying to work through that suspicious chicken you ate. Historians still argue whether this segmented sleep was a universal norm or more common in rural, pre-industrial areas. Either way, written accounts from monks, physicians, and everyday folk all reference it. So it clearly wasn't just a local quirk. You shift again, trying not to disturb the dozen other humans stacked like laundry in the small sleeping space. There are no bedrooms, of course. Privacy is a foreign luxury. You're lucky if your designated sleeping spot doesn't put your nose directly against the family's chamber pot. Oh yeah, the chamber pot. You stare at it in the dark with mild resentment. It smells faintly like someone used it and then decided, close enough. If you're brave, you might use it yourself. If not, you'll just try not to think about your bladder and hope sleep takes you first. Outside, the world is very still. No lights, no hum of passing cars. Just the occasional hoot of an owl or the gentle shuffle of something small and hopefully non-bitey scuttling in the brush. This dark interval isn't all bad. You take a moment to just exist. Your muscles unwind further, your thoughts slow to a crawl. You listen to the breathing of the people around you, soft and warm and steady. This in-between time is strangely comforting. But soon, your body knows it's time to return to rest. This is the beginning of the second sleep. And in truth, this second sleep? It's the good one, the deeper one. The kind of rest that truly knocks you out and does the mental repair work. It drags you under gently, like warm wool pulled over your eyes. You let yourself drift. Hours pass. The darkness lightens by degrees, so slowly, it's almost imperceptible. Then, just as your dreams start to tangle into nonsense again, someone opens a door and lets in a blast of frigid morning air. Your eyes snap open. It's still pitch black. Of course it is. Welcome to the pre-dawn grind. Because medieval people didn't wait for sunlight to start their day. No, they beat it. Especially in winter. Work begins while the stars are still up, while frost bites at your toes, and while your body curses you in every available language. You don't rise gracefully. You grunt, stretch, hit your elbow on someone's knee, and climb over your cousin like a slow-moving barn cat. You splash a bit of icy water on your face from the basin in the corner, just enough to feel humanish. Someone is already poking at the hearth. The coals from last night have just enough life to spark with coaxing. A few coughs echo through the room as kindling crackles to life. You all gather around it like moths, hands held out, eyes half shut, bodies hunched in quiet rebellion against the concept of morning. First task of the day? Lighting more fires. If you're in a manor or a monastery, this might be a servant's job. moving from room to room to reheat the chill bones of the building. But if you're just a regular peasant, and let's face it, you are. It's all hands on deck. Rushlights, fat-soaked string, smouldering tinder. It takes skill and patience to make fire from scratch, and even more patience to keep it alive. You rub your hands together and mentally rank your fingers by how likely they are to fall off from frostbite. It's close. Breakfast, such as it is, comes soon after. It's not glamorous. It's yesterday's bread. Again, maybe softened with ale. Maybe you get some curds, or a bit of boiled grain. Occasionally, if a hen was generous overnight, there's an egg to share between 5 people. Tiny victories. But it fills the space in your stomach where hope used to be. One quirky morning habit among some medieval folk. Whispering charms or prayers into the fire as it was lit. Superstition was woven into daily routines. Little protections against bad luck, foul spirits, or just the grind of the next 16 hours. If you mumble something half-remembered while feeding the hearth, it's not weird. It's tradition. You eat standing up, still half wrapped in your night cloak, eyes barely open. Then it's time to go out, because the day is already happening. Somewhere, a rooster crows like it's proud of itself. You hate that rooster. You loved it once. That time has passed. You step outside, and the cold hits you like a sack of frozen bricks. Your breath fogs in the air, joining a rising plume of chimney smoke that curls lazily over the rooftops. The village is stirring, groaning, creaking, yawning into life. But it's not fast or eager. No one wants to be awake. They just have to be. You trudge across the frost-hardened ground, boots scuffing last night's dirt. If it's spring or summer, it's a little easier. Birds chirp. The breeze smells vaguely of plants trying their best. But in winter, it's just brown, grey, and more grey. A land of chill and silence. Your first stop is the field. Not because you're itching to get your hands in some good, honest soil, but because if you don't start soon, you'll fall behind. And in medieval life, falling behind means not eating next season. Welcome to the grinding heart of it all. The daily labour, cycle. Everything hinges on the land, and the land, as you've learned, doesn't care how tired you are. You bend to inspect the soil. It's heavy with dew, and the furrows you ploughed last week are already trying to forget they ever existed. The earth in this century has a stubborn streak. You sigh, grab your wooden hoe, and start again. Medieval farming is punishing. No tractors. No synthetic fertilizer, just your back, a plough if you're lucky, and maybe an ox that obeys only when the mood strikes. You've got to break the soil, clear weeds by hand, and sow seeds precisely, or face a whole season of regret. Mainstream fact time. Roughly 90% of the population in medieval Europe was involved in agriculture. It wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was the default setting. You didn't farm to be rustic or connected to the earth. You farmed because not doing so meant starvation. And it's not just grain. You might be tending to flax for linen, beans and peas to replenish soil nutrients, a garden patch with herbs, some for cooking, some for medicine, some just because the old lady 2 doors down said they kept away demons. But here's the thing they don't tell you in school. Farming wasn't just labour. It was a community ritual. Everyone's out here together, side by side, heads down, muttering complaints, trading gossip, swearing creatively when they hit a rock with their hoe. There's a strange comfort in it. The shared misery, the familiar rhythm. You can practically set your heartbeat by it. Fringe tidbit? Some medieval farmers observed ploughing songs, rhythmic chants or tunes sung in groups to keep momentum and morale up while doing the most back-breaking tasks. Think of it as the original work playlist, except your AirPods are actually a guy named Godric humming in Latin and slightly off-key. You pause mid-swing to scratch an itch with the handle of your tool. That's when you notice your neighbour, Tom, digging in a patch of ground that definitely isn't his. You wander over casually. Turns out, Tom is using strip farming, a system where communal land is divided into long, narrow strips and rotated yearly between families. He's arguing with Marjorie about where her strip ends and his begins. She insists it was 5 feet further east last year. Tom says the cow that measured it was drunk. Historians still argue whether these disputes were mostly settled by custom or by local manorial courts. Either way, a surprising amount of agricultural drama unfolded in these humble furrows. But eventually, the argument cools. Someone passes around a shared chunk of dried fruit. A tiny act of generosity that tastes like sunlight. You return to your row. You hoe. You plant. You sweat, even in the cold. Then, mercifully, it's time for a break. Not lunch, not yet. Just a brief pause. You sit on an overturned bucket or a stone. You stretch your fingers and listen. The sounds of the countryside begin to rise. A dog barking in the distance. The soft clatter of hooves as someone rides into the village. Likely a trader or newsbringer, or just someone lost and looking for beer. Your stomach rumbles. You ignore it. You have one job right now. Survive until the next proper meal. As the sun crawls higher, you move on to secondary tasks. Maybe that's fixing a fence, or hauling wood, or tending to the pig who's decided that rolling in mud is a personality trait. Somewhere in the background, a bell tolls. If you're under the thumb of a monastery, and let's be honest, you probably are, that bell runs your life. It marks prayer hours, work changes, feast days, and silent periods. You might not know exactly what time it is in modern terms, but you know it's terce or sext, and that means either get up or sit down, depending on which monk is glaring at you. You glance up at the sky. Still morning. Barely. And yet you've already done enough to qualify as a full day in modern office standards. You'd laugh if your back didn't hurt. One last pass through the field. You scoop up the last of the seeds, sprinkle them like tiny promises, and tamp them into the soil with your feet. Someone nearby starts singing one of those ploughing songs again. You find yourself humming along, even though you don't know the words. Then, without ceremony, you shoulder your tools and head back toward the village for the midday meal, the second best meal of the day, and arguably the best moment of it, but you'll get there in a bit. For now, you trudge, mud clinging to your boots like regret. A light breeze picks up. You smell something. Maybe onions. Possibly hope. Or possibly your neighbor's compost pile. Hard to say. You're back in the village now, the familiar jumble of timber-framed houses and narrow lanes. The smell of smoke and cooking fires wraps around you like a heavy cloak. By midday, the sun is higher, but the air still carries the bite of early spring, or the stubborn chill of late autumn, depending on the season. The village is noisier now. The sounds of the morning's work are mingling with chatter. Children, playing, and the occasional clatter of a wheelbarrow or cart. It's a little chaotic, but in that comforting way you've come to expect. Lunch isn't fancy, but it's steady fuel, mostly pottage. Think of a thick stew made from whatever. Vegetables are on hand, sometimes with bits of meat or fish if the day has been lucky. Bread accompanies it, hard and dense. If you're lucky, there's cheese or a smattering of fresh herbs from the garden. You sit wherever you can, on a bench, a barrel, or even the ground, and eat in small, quick bites, stealing moments between chores. No one is in a rush to linger. There's always something waiting to be done. After a few mouthfuls, the inevitable happens. Someone starts talking about the weather. This isn't small talk. The weather means survival. Rain can mean soggy fields and ruined crops. Drought spells famine. An early frost can kill the tender shoots that represent your next meal. There's an odd mix of superstition and observation in these conversations. Red sky at night, shepherd's delight, was probably first muttered by a medieval farmer squinting at the horizon, hoping it meant a dry tomorrow. Historians still debate how accurate these folk sayings really were, but their endurance speaks to something deeper, a desperate hope to understand a chaotic world. Between mouthfuls and weather talk, the village buzzes with other news, rumours of the Lord's court, talk of market prices, or whispers about the strange stranger who arrived last week. These tidbits spread fast, especially since news travelled slower than a lazy cart horse. You chew thoughtfully, listening to the mix of voices. A fringe fact sneaks into your mind. Some medieval communities used news messengers. Children or elderly folks paid, or more often bribed with food, to carry news from village to village. The job was as unreliable as you'd expect. By the time the message arrived, it was often wildly distorted, leading to unexpected consequences. Imagine hearing that the king was invading, only to discover it was really just the baker's son lost in the woods. Lunch finished, the workday shifts gears. You're tasked with something different now, maybe fixing a fence, hauling water from the well, or working in the communal garden patch. The afternoon is for the jobs that can't wait, but don't require the dawn's urgent energy. There's a rhythm to these chores, a pulse that carries you through fatigue. As you work, the village children weave between adults, laughing and shrieking. Their games are simple but fierce, chasing, wrestling, or balancing on logs. You remember doing the same, muddy and fearless. Sometimes an adult will pause their work to scold or join in, both acts carrying equal weight. You catch a glimpse of the village healer, a woman who's half medicine maker, half mystery. She carries a basket filled with dried herbs and strange powders, mumbling under her breath about the fever spreading in the next village. Her eyes flicker with worry, but also determination. Herbal medicine was the backbone of medieval healthcare, and while some remedies were surprisingly effective, others were questionable, like the time she suggested applying a poultice made from crushed snails. You remember thinking, well, it's certainly slimy. Historians still argue how much medieval medicine really helped versus how much it was a mix of luck and hope. As the sun dips lower, you sense the day's momentum shifting again. The village starts to settle. Tools are stacked, animals fed, the last fires stoked. And just like that, the rhythm slows, preparing you for the cycle to start again. You pause for a moment, feeling the ache in your muscles and the dirt under your nails. It's not a glamorous life, but it's yours. The sun casts long shadows over the village, signaling that soon you'll begin the evening rituals, the ones that wrap the day in stories, supper, and the strange, beautiful tradition of first and second sleep. But for now, you breathe deeply, savoring the cool air, and let the steady hum of village life wash over you. As evening creeps in, the village shifts into a quieter mode, almost like a slow exhale after the day's steady grind. The sky deepens, from pale blue to bruised purple, then to a blanket of starry blackness. The air cools, carrying with it the faint sense of wood smoke and cooking embers. You make your way back to the house, feeling the familiar pull of tiredness settle deep into your bones. It's been a long day, and the promise of supper, however modest, is a beacon. Dinner in the medieval world is a humble affair, especially for you. The Lord's table may groan with roasted meats and fine wines, but your meal is mostly leftovers from midday or whatever the household had stashed away. Pottage again, maybe a hunk of cheese, a few crusts of bread, sometimes a bit of salted pork if you're lucky. You gather with family or neighbors around the hearth, faces lit by flickering flames that dance and stretch shadows across the rough-hewn walls. This small circle is your world, your comfort. Evening is when stories come out. The oral tradition is strong. You listen to tales of local legends, saints, or sometimes wild exaggerations about the recent town fair. These stories help you make sense of your place in the world, weaving threads between the mundane and the magical. One fringe habit involves telling the bees before you eat. It's said that bees are the guardians of your home's luck, so you whisper to the hive about what you're about to do. Share food, tell stories, even go to bed. It's charming to think of bees as tiny, buzzing confidants, isn't it? Historians still debate whether these customs were widespread or just charming eccentricities preserved in a few texts and memories. But they add colour to the otherwise grey tapestry of daily toil. After the meal, the village enters a time for quiet chores, tending to the animals, patching clothes, preparing tools for the next day. The sounds here are softer now, the gentle clucking of hens, the rustle of fabric, the occasional creak of wood settling in the cool night air. You wrap yourself in a woolen cloak and take a moment at the window. The stars twinkle coldly, distant and indifferent. Yet there's a strange comfort in their presence, a reminder that life moves on, no matter the hardships. Then comes one of the most peculiar medieval habits, communal bedtimes. You might share your sleeping space with several family members, or even neighbors if space is tight. Beds are narrow, stuffed with straw or feathers, and piled with blankets that smell faintly of sheep and smoke. There's warmth in this closeness. But privacy? That's a luxury you've only heard about. Remember the first sleep? Now, as you settle in, you anticipate that natural wakefulness in the night. Sometimes you'll find others awake too, sharing whispered prayers or quiet conversations by candlelight. Some scholars think these night wakes were times for reflection, socializing, or even problem-solving, while others argue they were simply the body's natural rhythm before the age of artificial lighting. Whatever the case, you're ready to drift off, eyes heavy, mind slowing. Before sleep fully claims you, you might whisper a prayer or two, asking for protection, a good harvest, or simply a painless morning. Your head sinks into the lumpy pillow, and the world tilts gently into darkness. Sleep comes in two waves. Tonight, you'll wake once briefly in that mysterious night gap, then sink back down into a deeper, restorative rest. Tomorrow, the rhythm begins anew. But for now, let yourself fall, softly, into the medieval night. You awake in the dark, as expected. The night air feels cooler against your skin now that you're no longer wrapped tightly in your blankets. Around you, others in the room shift quietly, some already sitting up, their eyes adjusting to the soft glow of a nearby candle or the moonlight spilling through the window. This is the mysterious first wake, or watch, that curious medieval sleep habit where people naturally woke up in the middle of the night. It's not insomnia, not a curse. It's just how human sleep cycles often worked before electric lights tricked your brain into staying asleep longer. You might spend this wakeful time tending to a small task, checking on a child, feeding a fire, or even heading outside to relieve yourself. Or maybe you're like many and simply lie in the dark, listening to the quiet, an ancient, peaceful kind of solitude. Historians still argue whether this segmented sleep was the norm or a seasonal thing, depending on how much light there was, or if it faded with the arrival of modern lighting. But there's evidence in diaries and court records that people treated this wakefulness as a natural and sometimes sacred part of the night. You lean back, closing your eyes briefly, savoring the pause. Sometimes people use this time for prayer or reflection, whispering thanks or worries to the night. The silence can be both comforting and a little eerie. One quirky tidbit. In some areas, there was a superstition that witches or spirits were most active during this first wake period, so people might say protective prayers or even keep a sharp knife nearby. Imagine that, your middle of the night, Buddy being your trusty kitchen blade. You glance around the dim room. Your fellow sleepers are still mostly quiet, wrapped in their own worlds of thought and restlessness. Outside, the village sleeps under a sky full of stars, still and expectant. As your body relaxes again, you realize this pause is a gift, a chance to reset before the final stretch of sleep. The world slows, and you drift gently back toward dreams. The second sleep promises deeper rest, longer dreams, and a preparation for the dawn's demands. For now, you rest in this timeless, quiet space, caught between yesterday and tomorrow. As your body finally slips back into the second sleep, you find yourself drifting through deeper dreams, the kind that feel both vivid and hazy, half memories, half imaginations. The darkness around you is thick, a gentle cocoon that shields you from the world's worries. This second sleep lasts until the first light of dawn creeps through the shutters, a pale promise of a new day. The birds begin their tentative songs, the village slowly stirring from its rest. You wake once more, but this time it's different. A full awakening. A gentle return to the world outside the blankets. Morning routines kick in immediately. You stretch the stiffness from your limbs and begin the preparations for the day ahead. Bathing isn't part of the plan. Medieval hygiene is a complicated topic. Public baths existed in some places, but often they were more social hubs than cleanliness centers. Sometimes bathing was frowned upon, believed to open pores to disease or invite evil spirits. You probably won't survive a medieval spa day without a cold shower and a healthy dose of skepticism. Instead, you might just splash some water on your face or rub down with a cloth scented with herbs to freshen up. Teeth brushing. Forget it. Most people didn't have toothbrushes. They chewed on twigs or rinsed with water and called it a day. The village awakens with the same slow, steady rhythm you've come to expect. Chickens cluck, dogs bark, and the first calls of market vendors echo through the streets. You eat a quick breakfast, likely more bread and cheese, maybe a piece of fruit if the season allows. The medieval day is already in full swing, but it's not just work. There are church bells to heed, social obligations to navigate, and the constant undercurrent of survival pulling everything along. One fringe sleep habit you might find surprising. Some medieval people believed that dreams seen during this second sleep had prophetic meaning. They recorded them, shared them with wise women or monks, hoping for guidance or warnings. Dream interpretation was serious business, a blend of spirituality and superstition. Historians still argue whether this dream culture was widespread or limited to certain social classes, but it certainly added a layer of mystery to the otherwise pragmatic daily life. You stand preparing to face whatever the day throws at you. The rhythm of labor, rest, prayer, and community continues its endless cycle. As you step outside, the village seems both familiar and strange. The same struggles, the same small joys, and the same strange sleep patterns that shape the lives of millions. And just like that, you are part of the endless human story. You head out into the fresh morning air, feeling the cool breeze on your face as the village wakes around you. The light feels softer now, less harsh than the midday glare. The earth is still damp with dew, glinting like a million tiny jewels on the grass. Morning tasks await, but they come with a different energy than yesterday's slog. There's a sense of renewal, a promise wrapped in the quiet moments before the sun climbs high. You might start by tending to the animals. Chickens, pigs, cows, each one needing food, water, and attention. Their needs are simple but relentless. You know them well, their habits and quirks. The pigs wallow happily in the mud. The chickens peck busily at the ground, and the cows chew thoughtfully, ever patient. One odd medieval custom around animals catches your eye. Some farmers believed that the way their animals behaved in the morning foretold the day's weather. If the chickens were noisy and restless, rain might be coming. If the cows lay down early, it was a sign of a cold snap. Historians still debate how much these observations influenced medieval farming decisions, or if they were just charming folk beliefs passed down through generations. You move on to checking the grain stores or the garden patches. Perhaps you're harvesting some herbs or vegetables for the day's meals. Every seed, every leaf counts. Work here is never just physical. It's intertwined with hope and worry. A poor harvest means hunger. A good one means survival, and maybe a small celebration. You recall the strange practice of crop divination, where farmers would read cracks in the soil or the shape of weeds to predict the coming season's success. It sounds almost like superstition, but for medieval people, it was a crucial form of weather forecasting, long before the modern farmer's almanac. As you move from task to task, you hear voices calling out greetings and trading snippets of news. The social fabric of the village is woven tight. You rely on neighbors as much as on the land. By late morning, you're already planning for the next meal, the next round of chores, the inevitable moments of rest. The day stretches ahead, full of promise and hard work. But for now, you take a breath, feel the sun on your skin, and embrace the rhythm of medieval life. Challenging, unyielding, but deeply human. The afternoon sun climbs higher now, warming the village streets and fields. Shadows shrink beneath the steady gaze of the sky. The heat is steady, not too harsh, but enough to draw beads of sweat on your forehead and stick your shirt to your back. You're caught in the afternoon's labor, that tricky stretch where energy starts to wane, but there's still work to be done. The rhythm feels familiar, the steady drone of tools, the murmur of voices, and the occasional bird call overhead. Today's task might be mending fences, thatched roofing, or hauling water from the village well. It's the kind of work that demands your full attention, but your mind wanders, thinking about the next meal, the weather, or the strange dreams you had during second sleep. Speaking of which, here's a fun medieval quirk. Some people believe that working certain tasks at specific times influence their fortune. For instance, it was said that repairing a fence during an eclipse could bring bad luck, or that water, drawn from a well at dawn, had healing powers. You can imagine how seriously these superstitions could affect daily routines. Historians still debate how widespread these beliefs really were. Were they a backbone of medieval thought, or just colourful footnotes? As the day progresses, you notice the village children emerging from their morning playtime, now helping with smaller chores or running errands. Their energy seems endless, a sharp contrast to the adults' slow-burning fatigue. You watch one child balancing on a fence, trying not to fall, laughter bubbling up around him. It's a small, bright moment amid the steady march of survival. Later, you might see neighbors sharing a quick drink or trading a piece of news, a whispered word about the Lord's recent visit, or a rumor about bandits spotted on the road. Information travels slower than a knight's horse, but it's no less vital. By late afternoon, the village takes on a golden hue, the sun lowering and casting long shadows. The air cools again, and there's a hint of relief in the breeze. You begin wrapping up your work, preparing for the evening's quiet rituals, meals, stories, and the return to that peculiar segmented sleep pattern. The day has been long, but the village pulses with life and tradition, steady as the turning seasons. You breathe deeply, appreciating the simple cadence of this medieval world. Tough, a bit strange, and utterly human. As twilight deepens, the village softens into a familiar calm. The sky drapes itself in shades of indigo and violet, the last flickers of sunlight slipping away. You move through the quiet streets, the sounds now muted, a dog's distant bark, the faint crackle of a dying fire. Evening chores are quieter, more reflective. You gather firewood for the hearth, fill water basins, or mend worn clothes by candlelight. The tasks seem less urgent, more a slow preparation for the night's rest. Dinner again is simple, a repeat of the day's earlier fare, or perhaps some dried fruits if you're lucky. The food is plain, but it carries the warmth of community and survival. One interesting medieval sleep habit is the use of bedtime prayers or blessings. People believed that reciting certain verses before sleep protected them from nightmares or evil spirits. You might mumble the Lord's Prayer or a short psalm, feeling a strange comfort in the ritual. Historians still debate how seriously everyone took these prayers, or if they were more about tradition than true fear. But there is a clear link between faith and the human need for safety. The household settles around the fire, sharing stories and soft laughter. Children listen wide-eyed to tales of saints, heroes, or mythical beasts. The stories weave together entertainment, instruction, and spiritual guidance, all rolled into one. You recall the strange medieval fear of nightmares being caused by night hags, supernatural creatures who sat on sleepers' chests, causing bad dreams and sleep paralysis. People tried various charms and remedies to ward off these visitors, from wearing amulets to sleeping near holy objects. Your own pillow feels softer tonight, though still far from the plush comforts of modern beds. The hour grows late, and the village dims its lights, retreating into silence. You prepare once more for the two-part sleep cycle, knowing you'll awaken again, briefly, in that dark space between first and second sleep. The rhythm of night, like the day, is both strange and natural, a dance with the unknown that countless generations have known before you. You close your eyes, letting the quiet pull you toward dreams and rest. Night wraps the village in its gentle cloak once more. you sink into the familiar warmth of your bed, the straw mattress yielding just enough to cradle your tired body. The fire crackles softly nearby, its glow a tiny island of light in the vast dark. You're ready for that first sleep, the deep but brief rest before waking again. As your breath slows, you can feel the slow heartbeat of the night pulsing all around. The medieval bedroom is a modest space, often shared with others, with simple furnishings, wooden chests, coarse blankets, perhaps a small religious icon hanging on the wall. No electronic distractions here, just the quiet and your thoughts. One quirky habit: some people slept with a sprig of herbs like lavender or rosemary tucked under their pillows, believed to ward off nightmares and soothe the mind. You might catch a faint scent lingering in the air, calming and familiar. Historians still argue how effective or common these herbal sleep aids really were, but the practice hints at a medieval understanding of relaxation and health that you might not expect. As sleep pulls you under, you feel yourself slipping into a liminal space between wakefulness and dreams. This first sleep is restorative, but not the deep, dream-filled kind. You imagine the countless medieval souls before you, experiencing this same gentle rhythm: sleep, wake, sleep again, unaware of the modern sleep science that explains their patterns so clearly now. Outside, the night deepens, the stars tracking slow circles across the sky. In this stillness, your mind drifts to the world beyond your little room, the fields lying fallow in moonlight, the distant watchfires of the Lord's castle, the quiet village dogs curled against the cold. The first sleep ends, but you don't need to rush. This wakeful pause is part of the night's natural flow, a chance to rest differently, to feel the heartbeat of darkness itself. You let the calm wash over you, surrendering to the timeless rhythm once more. You stir awake in the dark again, the quiet night wrapping around you like a soft blanket. This is the middle of the night waking, the first wake that everyone talks about but few truly understand. The room is shadowed and still, save for the soft breathing of your companions and the flicker of a lone candle someone has lit. You lie still for a moment, letting your eyes adjust. The world feels different at this hour, less urgent, more mysterious. In these moments, many medieval people would rise to pray, write, or even visit neighbors quietly. It wasn't seen as insomnia, but a natural part of the night's flow. One fascinating medieval practice during this waking was vigil, where people would sit quietly in the dark, reflecting on their day or meditating on spiritual matters. You might find comfort in that, the silence a kind of sacred pause. Historians still debate whether these wakeful hours were widely used for prayer and socializing or mostly for practical reasons like tending fires and animals. Either way, they were accepted, not feared. Outside your window, the moon hangs low, its silver light casting ghostly shadows on the walls. You catch a faint scent of herbs burning nearby, perhaps sage or rosemary, to protect the household from evil spirits believed to roam in the night. The superstition of night hags, those shadowy creatures pressing down on sleepers, is particularly vivid here. People carried charms or kept knives nearby as protection, blending fear with hope. You feel the cool night air brushing your skin and the soft sounds of the village in quiet rest, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. After a few moments, you might get up to stretch, take a sip of water, or whisper a prayer. These small rituals help ease the mind back towards sleep. The night feels endless, and yet full of quiet possibility, a secret time for reflection and renewal before the dawn. You close your eyes once more, ready to return to the deeper dreams awaiting you. The night folds over you again as you drift back towards sleep, the gentle pull of dreams beckoning. This second sleep promises a longer stretch of rest, where your mind wanders deeper into strange and vivid landscapes, sometimes clear, sometimes foggy, like a half-remembered story. Medieval people placed great importance on this second sleep. It was considered the true sleep, the time when your soul rejuvenated and your body repaired itself. In some cultures, it was even linked to the ability to dream prophetic visions. You might find yourself revisiting those dreams from earlier, trying to decipher their meanings, or simply letting them wash over you like a river's current. Interestingly, there was a belief that if you woke during the night and felt restless, it was a sign that evil spirits were nearby, or that you needed to change your sleeping position. Shifting sides in bed wasn't just comfort, it was protection. Historians still argue about how much these beliefs influenced actual sleep habits, or whether they were mostly superstition. But they reveal how intertwined sleep was with medieval spirituality and daily life. You breathe slowly, feeling the steady rhythm of your heart and the quiet sounds of the village night. A distant dog barking, the occasional clink of a bucket, the low murmur of late conversations. Your body surrenders to the second sleeps. Embrace the dark fabric of night wrapping around you as you travel further into the dream world. Outside, the stars wheel slowly across the sky, timeless witnesses to this ancient pattern of rest. The world seems paused, caught in this delicate balance of wakefulness and sleep, light and shadow. And you, lying here, are part of it all. Just another soul in the long story of human nights. The dawn's first light creeps softly into the room, painting everything with a pale golden glow. Your body begins to stir, the deep rest of second, sleep yielding to the gentle pull of morning. Outside, the village is slowly coming alive again. The low murmur of voices, the clatter of tools, the footsteps of early risers. You feel the familiar blend of fatigue and readiness, the moment where night's mysteries fade and day's demands begin. Medieval mornings carried their own unique rhythms. Without alarm clocks, people often relied on natural signs, the crowing of roosters, the light through the window, or the ringing of church bells, to rise and begin the day. One curious habit: some people would open their windows immediately, upon waking, believing that fresh air would drive out night spirits and fill the home with vitality. While you might cringe at the thought of the medieval streets' less than fresh aromas, the practice had its comforting logic. Historians still debate the extent to which these morning rituals varied by region and class, but they all underline the deep connection medieval people had with the natural world. You rise from your bed, muscles still gently stiff from sleep, but ready for the day's tasks. The smell of fresh bread baking in a neighbour's hearth drifts through the air, mingling with the earthy scent of the fields. You take a moment to stretch, feeling the comforting weight of routine settle around you. As you prepare for the day ahead, the memories of segmented sleep and nighttime wakefulness linger. A reminder that the medieval night was not one long stretch, but a complex dance of rest and awakening. And with that thought, you step fully into the new day, ready to play your part in this ancient human rhythm. As you move through the morning, you notice how deeply intertwined medieval sleep habits were with daily life and work. The segmented sleep pattern shaped not only how people rested, but how they organized their days. The break between first and second sleep was a natural pause, an opportunity for prayer, reflection, or even socializing. You might imagine neighbors quietly visiting one another during these nighttime hours, sharing stories or seeking advice, blurring the line between night and day. One curious fringe practice was the watching the night, where people would sit awake during the wakeful period, sometimes keeping fires burning or sharing quiet companionship. It was both practical and spiritual, a safeguard against dangers lurking in the dark, both real and imagined. Historians still debate whether this nocturnal socializing was common or mostly a rural phenomenon, but it certainly challenges our modern notion of night as strictly for sleep. This pattern also influenced work schedules. People might rise early after their second sleep, starting the day refreshed, or pace themselves differently, knowing they had those middle-of-the-night hours for rest and activity. In some places, monks followed a similar pattern, rising at night for prayers called vigils, connecting their spiritual duties with the natural rhythms of sleep. You reflect on how this ancient sleep pattern connects us to the past, a reminder that human beings have always adapted to the world around them in creative, sometimes surprising ways. Your own body might find the idea tempting to rest in 2 shifts, to embrace the quiet wakefulness as part of the night. But for now, the day is fully here, and you move forward with a fresh understanding of the medieval night's strange, soothing cadence. By now, you've probably adjusted to the medieval rhythm, a world without ticking clocks, screen glare, or red-eye emails. You live by candlelight and church bells, by roosters and rumbling stomachs. And in this simpler, though not necessarily easier, life, sleep becomes a different kind of companion. You begin to notice how integrated rest is in everything. Not just the segmented sleep pattern you've grown used to, but the culture of short naps and pauses scattered throughout the day. In monastic life, for example, rest was structured, each hour mapped with prayer, labor, and brief moments of restoration. Monks would rise for matins in the middle of the night, pray, then return to their beds for second sleep. Among peasants, too, daytime naps weren't unusual, especially during long harvest days. A bit of shut-eye after lunch under a shady tree. Entirely acceptable. You feel that midday breeze on your skin now, the distant hum of bees in the hedgerows, the scent of warm bread fading into the scent of soil and sun. One odd practice some nobles followed. They believed sleeping in complete silence was dangerous. That's right. People sometimes paid for musicians or servants to hum, talk, or even softly argue nearby to keep the spirit from wandering. Imagine falling asleep to someone debating whether stew is better with onions, charming, or maddening. Historians still argue whether this was an actual widespread habit or just a curious anecdote from eccentric nobles. Either way, it hints at how sleep wasn't seen as a time to fully shut down, but a liminal space that needed management and guarding. Your own rest feels richer now. The hum of life, the fire, the wind through the shutters, the quiet breath of others in the room. It all becomes part of the sleep experience, not a distraction from it. You find that slowness isn't laziness, it's rhythm. And in this world, rhythm is everything. The days pass in their easy, deliberate tempo. You find yourself moving more slowly, but with purpose, measured, like the toll of a monastery bell. And in this slow-motion version of life, your awareness of sleep changes too. It's not just something that happens at night. It threads its way into every part of the day. Nowhere is this more visible than in the lives of the sick and the elderly. You spend some time in a cottage today, seated near an older woman with a deeply lined face and tired eyes. She naps often, sometimes for just a few minutes, sometimes for longer, and no one rushes her or finds it unusual. Sleep was medicine, rest a cure. In medieval thought, sleep helped balance the 4 humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too little sleep? You'd become dry and irritable. Too much? Sluggish and cold. The key was moderation, of course, though moderation in medieval practice often involved leeches, so grain of salt. One bizarre fringe belief. People thought sleeping on your left side promoted digestion, but only if your pillow was stuffed with sage. If you were wealthy enough, your pillow might even contain swan feathers or crushed mint. The poor made do with straw, and sometimes not even that. Historians still debate whether such customs were sincerely followed or simply recited as part of medical law, passed down with a shrug and a smirk. But it does show how deeply sleep was tangled up with ideas of health and healing. Even now, as you rest in the quiet of this cottage, you feel how sleep was never an inconvenience in this world. It was accepted, encouraged, even invited in the middle of the day. You settle onto a wooden bench, your back against the wall, and let your eyes drift shut for a few moments. A nap in the middle of a medieval afternoon. Perfectly normal. You wake from your midday doze to the sound of wind brushing the trees and the muffled chatter of villagers going about their business. There's no rush, just the low thrum of life moving steadily forward. And as the hours pass, you begin to realize how deeply connected medieval people were to the natural cycle of light and dark. Without electricity, everything bent to the sun's rhythm. Your day started when the light allowed and ended when the shadows stretched too long. Sleep was simply an extension of the environment, a thing that ebbed and flowed like the seasons, not a tightly regulated 8-hour obligation. You walk slowly down a dirt path, past cottages and stables, and pass by a man lighting a torch for the evening. Torches and rushlights were the main sources of light at night, though candles were prized and often expensive. You remember that some families would only light one candle per night, and only for a short time, part ritual, part economy. One strange medieval belief: it was thought dangerous to sleep under a full moon, especially if the light touched your face. It could cause lunacy, or so the whispers claimed. People pulled blankets over their heads or rearranged sleeping positions to avoid the moon's poisonous gaze. Historians still argue whether fear of moonlight was widespread or just a quirky superstition that lingered among certain groups. But the idea of the moon being a silent danger adds yet another layer of mystical charm to the medieval sleep experience. As night returns, you help prepare the room again, laying down straw bedding, adjusting your position near the hearth for warmth. You've grown used to the feel of scratchy linens and stiff wooden bed frames. The house dims once more. You can hear the faint popping of burning wood and the occasional creak of timber in the night air. And you feel ready, again, to enter the calm strangeness of the medieval night. The fire dies down to glowing embers. Outside, the village sinks into stillness, punctuated only by the distant hoot of an owl or the occasional shuffle of a restless sleeper adjusting their weight. You return to bed for what may be your final full sleep before the cycle begins again. This time, your thoughts drift not to herbs or moonlight, but to beds themselves. What did people actually sleep on? And how did comfort differ across the classes? For you, a lucky traveller through this dreamscape, it's a simple straw mattress, stuffed with hay, reeds, or maybe wool if you're slightly better off. It sits on a wooden frame, raised to avoid the cold draft of the floor. If you're wealthy, you might have a feather bed, layered with fine linens and draped with thick curtains to keep warmth in and bugs out. But for most people, especially peasants, a bed might just be a pile of hay in the corner. Interestingly, some homes didn't have separate bedrooms at all. You'd sleep in the main room with the rest of your family, siblings, parents, and sometimes even animals nearby for warmth. Cozy, in theory. One bizarre tidbit: in some households, children and parents slept head to toe to avoid sharing dreams, or because they believed it minimized illness spread. That's some pretty creative spatial reasoning. Historians still debate whether shared sleeping spaces were primarily practical or had deeper social implications, like reinforcing family bonds, class hierarchies, or moral values. Either way, privacy wasn't the goal. Sleep was public, social, and above all, necessary. The more you adjust to this world, the more its rhythms begin to feel oddly natural. You don't need blackout curtains or sleep apps, just the sound of the wind, the warmth of the hearth, and the knowledge that the night is not something to escape, but something to inhabit. So you curl under your coarse woolen blanket, exhale deeply, and let the stillness return. The final night wraps itself around you like a familiar old cloak, frayed at the edges, soft from long use. You lie still on your humble bed of straw, now well accustomed to its lumpy charm. The fire is nearly out, glowing faintly with that soft, sleepy light you've come to find oddly comforting. Tonight, you think about the odd things people used to do while they slept. Because in medieval times, sleep wasn't just a passive activity. It was full of beliefs, behaviors, and, yes, even a few sleepwalking shenanigans. There were tales of nocturnal wanderers, people believed to be under a spell or caught between worlds. If someone walked in their sleep, villagers might whisper that they were bewitched or being visited by spirits. It wasn't just a harmless quirk. It could be interpreted as a sign of divine calling or demonic influence. Fun dreams, right? And yet, Some sleep behaviors were so common they didn't even raise eyebrows. People talked in their sleep, prayed, aloud, muttered confessions, or even giggled. Some households used this to their advantage. You might be asked a question while half asleep, just to see if you'd blurt out something truthful. That's one way to keep family secrets spicy. One fringe belief, sleeping with garlic under your pillow would keep away bad dreams. Others preferred iron keys, blessed relics, or even a small cloth soaked in holy water. Whether these worked or not, the effort people made to protect their sleep speaks volumes about how fragile and sacred rest was considered to be. Historians still argue whether these practices were rooted more in genuine fear or simple tradition, passed down through generations like bedtime stories wrapped in superstition. The night feels thicker now, deeper somehow, but you don't fear it anymore. You understand it. The creaks of wood and whispers of wind no longer unsettle, they soothe. You've walked through centuries of sleep habits, customs, and quirks. You've watched the firelight flicker on old stone walls. You've stretched out in straw beds and ducked under moonbeams like they carried curses. And now, you're ready to let it all go. Wind down, 300 words. You're still now, breathing slow. The medieval world, with all its strange wisdom and weirder worries, fades gently behind you. Let your shoulders soften. Let your arms rest heavy and warm, right where they are. There's nothing else to do tonight. You've seen all you need to see. Heard more than enough whispered prayers and flickering tales. Now there's only the steady beat of your heart and the quiet. Let your thoughts drift like smoke rising from a snuffed-out candle. You might still catch the scent of herbs hanging from the rafters, or the gentle creak of wooden beams settling above you. Let those sounds lull you. Let them carry you to sleep. Whatever worries you brought into bed, whatever stayed just behind your eyes until now, let them dissolve like mist at dawn. This is your time. This is your rest. If the moon finds your window tonight, it won't haunt you. It will bless you. Its light won't disturb your sleep. It will anchor it. You're wrapped in centuries of dreams, in the hush of 1,000 quiet nights. And every breath you take now is part of that long, peaceful rhythm. So drift, float, sleep. You've earned it. Sweet dreams. Sweet dreams.